Well, today on Rethink Real Estate, we have Whitney Elkins-Hutten, and we discuss wealth creation. I know that this could come across as another one of those financial podcasts where everyone's telling you to buy real estate, but we really get into the nitty gritty of how she started, what she did in order to then accumulate from absolutely nothing into something. It's not one of those shows that it's like, oh, go out and save, a few $100,000 and then you'll be fine, or whatever it may be. We speak about the awkwardness of what the price points are at the moment within certain marketplaces where a lot of people have the feeling that they need to do it in their backyard. We also talk about making sure that you get yourself in a healthy position before you do purchase your first property in order for it to make sense. It's just obviously making sure that as realtors, which is majority of our audience, that we understand the nature of how to build portfolios so that we can advise our clients the best way we possibly can in order to make them clients that are doing 1, 2, 3, 10, 15, 20 transactions with us along the way. Either way, hopefully this episode helps. Thanks. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Whitney, welcome to Rethink Real Estate.
Thank you so much for having me on.
First little hurdle that we had to get over is that your name was too long to fit into the actual comment. So I'll get Chris to make sure that he cuts it and makes it look properly, okay?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Had I had the foresight when I got married, I never would have hyphenated. I would have just made my maiden name my middle name. But, it's caused a lot of problems.
Oh, well, you know what? I think that's a champagne problem, really, if we think about it. Now,
Absolutely.
First and foremost is that asking if someone's just tuning into the episode, why should they hang around and keep listening?
We're going to drop some mad knowledge here. I mean, essentially the playbook to get from, just having active income into like having repeated passive income and long-term wealth. And so, we were talking before the show, we're going to connect the dots for people and show them the simple strategies. I'm not saying it's easy, but the simple strategies to get there.
Well, I think that there's two things that come out of that. Is that first and foremost is that I'm not cool enough to use the terminology mad knowledge. Okay, I don't know if that suits my demeanor, but that being said, is that there's a couple of things that I'm curious about when it comes to reading your profile and going through things. Is that there was something about an 800 million plus real estate fund that you're a partner within? And I'm just interested to talk a little bit about that first and foremost, because that was something that like you invest in real estate, you invest in self-storage units, you've got them over 11 different states, you're flipping over $5 million in residential real estate as well. So there's a lot of different buckets that you have. And one of the distinct issues when it comes, and something that we like to bring into Rethink Real Estate is somebody like yourself, because I think one of the distinct issues when it comes to real estate agents or realtors or whatever you want to call them is that who is our community we're speaking to, is that building wealth along the way is typically something that they're not very good at. They're typically good at, getting one deal done, getting a bulk amount, and then living from that bulk amount or paying back any debt that they accumulated during that bulk amount. And again, I'm generalizing a little bit, but that would be, I'd say as far as, community basis, 70% of the community, 71% of realtors last year in North America did not do a deal, not one deal. So part of this is some steps that when you do get that lump sum of a commission, how do you handle it? What do you do with it? And essentially leading back to my original question that I'm curious about is that how did you get yourself to the position that you're in at the moment?
Small incremental steps, consistency and persistency. And so, for me, when I started off in real estate, it was completely by accident. I was not born and bred. I did not go to school to be the director of investor education at passiveinvesting.com or found my own company, Ash Wealth, which is coaching and mentoring. I was working a W-2 job and I bought a house with a significant other. We thought we were going to live there. That was going to be like our family starter home. Well, a month later, life changed. The relationship fell apart. I had the house. And so I fell into cash flowing real estate almost by accident, because I had to stuff it full of roommates so I could pay the bills, had to do a rehab on the property, value add rehab in order to get it sold, because nobody wanted to buy like a property that had psychedelic daisies painted all over the walls and green shag carpet. 11 months later, I walked away with this check. which kind of harkens back to what a lot of people are doing here. They're getting that injection, of cash, but how can you make it sustainable? And for me, I had to do a few more live-in flips in house hacks before I went, wait a second, how would I ever retire off of this? Like, I mean, it's great. Like if I do a flip this year and I make 80, 100, 200K, but if I have a dry year and I'm not
Yeah.
bringing in any income, like what now? And really, after probably doing 6 or 7 flips, a friend of mine was like, "Why don't you hold on to one of those flips and put a renter into it?" And I had never really rented property before, but I was like, "That's genius. Why don't I do that?" And then I started building up small income streams, taking my active income off the table in small chunks at a time, buying property. I would still do my value add strategy on that property, but I put a tenant in there. So I was
Right.
getting month over month cash flow.
Okay. And I guess that just a couple of rapid fire questions just to get an establishment of that. Were you working another job at the time, or was flipping your primary source of income?
Well, it was my primary source of income, but I was working another job at the
Okay.
time. And that was very strategic for me because I was able to get lending because I had a W-2 job. I was able to get, conventional lending.
That is something that is so underrated for a lot of people in the sense that doing business planning with a lot of realtors, it's like, no, have your company pay you something because the lender is going to have to see something if you are looking at borrowing anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're, a realtor, like, are you set up and organized like an S corp? And, we can go down the tax rabbit hole all day long, but I was working in another job. So was my husband. And so we each had two buckets of income stream. So I could qualify for my 10 golden tickets and my husband could qualify for his 10 golden tickets.
Yep.
And, for a lot of, real estate investors, that's really all they need in order to build up a nice solid stream of income. But that takes a lot of time, energy, and intention to do that because you're finding the deal, closing on the deal, finding the lending. If it needs a rehab, you're doing all that, finding your tenants. Even if you have a property manager, you have leverage time, but you're still very active.
Yep.
Um, but after I did that process 40 times over, I was a slow learner, so to speak.
Well,
I,
there's a part of this also, Whitney, that I'm curious about though, is that this makes so much sense, and the people that are listening probably like, yeah, no, I've heard all this before. Why is it that you think that people don't action this in the sense that you would live in flip is something that you said just then, is that it makes total sense that, don't get me wrong, is that you're in the real estate community, you should know a good deal when you see a good deal. And then if you execute on that deal and you live in that property and then you're fixing it up as you go, but most people will complain about their financial situation, but then they won't want to put themselves in a position of being uncomfortable with a kitchen that's torn apart or a bathroom that's not 100% functional or anything. I'm also speaking on my own behalf, is that like if someone told me right now to go and do a live-in flip, I'd go, oh, that sounds awful. Now, again, that's just my attitude right now, knowing that it's actually better off for me financially in the future. What do you think the disconnect is there? What was the moment that you're like, no, I'm happy to live in a little bit of chaos and make some money at the end of it, versus no, I need to get my life perfect the way that it is right now so that I can just keep, with the monogamy.
Well, at that point in time, I had only been living in chaos. I didn't know any different, right? I had just gotten back from traveling overseas. I, traveled a lot in the United States for my job. I mean, I lived out of a suitcase. Like chaos was my middle name in a way. So but as I grew in my real estate business and eventually transitioned from live and flips and house hacks to buy and hold real estate, not relying on my own, roof over my head to provide equity, you get a little comfortable, right? Right now, if I approach my husband, I'm like, hey, let's turn our house into a triplex. And he was like, when our daughter goes to college, yes, I will let you do that. Not right now. He's like, he's comfortable,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, but I think about it, hard life now, easy life later. If you have an easy life now, you're going to have to make some hard decisions later. And so, we kind of conflated two different phases of my journey. One, the live and flip and house hack, which was, if I had to do it all over again, I would still start off that way because, for people that are trying to figure out how do I get started with real estate investing, one of the easiest ways is with the roof over your head,
Yeah.
right? because now you're taking a big asset and making it your asset. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. They think when I buy a piece of property, it's an asset for me. And I'm like, no,
Yep.
if it's your primary resident and there's no income stream, it's not your asset, it's the bank's asset. Like, do the math, right?
Yeah.
Who's getting paid money on this? And then if we can, create additional streams of income outside of that, maybe, if you don't want to share with roommates, go buy a duplex and live on one side and rent out the other. Buy a quad. You can get 1 to 4 units with conventional financing. Or you can build your own single family rental portfolio, or what I like doing now, which is investing in other people's deals like multifamily, self-storage, and the like.
Let's get to that here shortly, but I do want to sort of just dive into, part of this in the perspective of a playbook to do this. I'd love to walk through some of your first deals, because we've either lost people already on the episode where they're like, "Oh, I don't have any money, I'm not going to do that," or people that have like, well, tell me what to do step by step by step by step. Like, if we could just map this out from a perspective of your first house, you said that, you sort of ended up with it. How much was it? What did you get out of it? How did you get your next one? How do you, because it's something that I'm really curious about, is that how do you actually take debt, or how do you use that leverage to build a portfolio as quickly as possible from your perspective?
There is a lot to unpack there. So if we're going to take the playbook as it is, that's very different from how I did it, because
Okay.
I wrote the book Money for Tomorrow as really as originally as an instruction guide for my daughter, to be like, don't make the mistakes I made. Like, this is how you build wealth. Like, if
Right.
we're going to learn from properly from the beginning, this is how money works. This is, we have to have a positive balance sheet. We have to have positive income versus our expenses. That way we can save money. That way we have money to invest, right? Like, I didn't start off like that. I was 103% financed on my first deal, and
Right.
borrowing money to get it get it going. But so for the playbook, there are some certain logical steps, but I think let's even back it up further. I mean, I think people need to have a anchored understanding of what they are trying to achieve. And
Right.
if we're looking at generational wealth, it's really to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want. And the generational part is to teach the next generation to do the same, right? So you're not shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in like 3 generations. You haven't lost everything. Future generations don't lose everything you've built.
So is that your primary purpose in all of this, is to leave generational wealth and have as much time and do what you want now? Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. And this is what I love doing, is teaching people how to do this, right? Empowering people. So I really feel, especially in the United States, and I would say that this is a common struggle across the world, that it's not financial literacy that we're missing. It's the ability to take action upon the knowledge that we have. So I call that financial capacity. So
Right.
it's like what you were saying. Somebody like tunes into this and you're like, oh, great, another financial person that's teaching me how money works, and I should be investing in real estate as opposed to just buying selling real estate. Like, I should be holding that and creating income streams. Yes, right? Like, it's like, let's execute on what we know actually works, right? And there's a reason why those things work. And it's because once we understand the objective, we need to understand the rules and the strategies on how wealth works.
Okay.
And that leads us to the billionaire's playbook. The billionaire's playbook means that we invest in assets that, one, preserve capital, create cash flow, build equity, and throw off tax benefits. Those are the first 4 things. Okay. Now, if
So
we can,
say those again for us.
it preserves capital,
Right.
meaning that it's backed by a hard asset. We have plenty of reserves. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of aspects of preserving capital, but preserves
Yep.
capital, creates cash flow, builds equity, and gives us tax benefits.
It's one of those things, though, that I think that there's a part of this, that there's a level of confusion out there at the moment in this market. And again, I'm sorry to take you down little rabbit holes here and misalign, because I'm also fascinated about, if you had to just list out mistakes in the beginning, I think that I really want to come back to that. But the part of this that I do a lot of coaching with some younger people within the organization that we have. And, I have several people come to me all the time saying, well, I'm like that are realtors. They might not own a home at this point. Our demographic within our own real estate business is quite young. And, the part of this is that most people have said, I really want to build, I want to buy a home. I want to build net worth within that home. There's a couple of different things in that. Is that at the moment, if you pencil it out, certainly where we live in Southern California, we're in Newport Beach, is that I've sat down many times with people and gone, actually doesn't make any sense whatsoever for you to buy a property. You should actually keep the money that you've saved and put it into the S&P 500 and actually forget about it. Because the taxes, the insurance, the HOA fees, because you can't really get a single family home for a certain reasonable price, all of that stuff, like at the end of the day, you break that down. And in essence, maybe $300 is going to principal. And then from a capital growth perspective, I think Southern California is going through a transition where maybe that capital growth isn't going to be as great over the next number of years. Now, there's a part of this also that then I come back to and I go, just stop overthinking this as well. Because then I start looking in, for example, I've got an opportunity to buy a property. It's a long-term rental that somebody actually reached out to me about the other day. They reached out to me in Georgia, right? And it's in Atlanta. And I look at that and it's like, well, look, the capital growth is probably not going to be there over the next X number of times. But, based on the cost that we can get it just makes a lot more sense in those other marketplaces. But then there's just so much noise and conflicting stuff about markets at this point. Is it the right time? Isn't it the right time? Like, I think that there's just this part that is real estate affordable for that individual? Can they make it cash flow at this point? The answer is yes, in the right market. What's your opinion on all of that?
To answer the question directly, for a lot of people, investing in their backyard just doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
especially if they're going to try to tap. And those are just four, capital preservation, cash flow, equity, and tax benefits. Those are just the four main drivers of the billionaire's playbook. There's three others to add to that, and maybe a fourth. But long story short, those are the big four that are going to move the needle the furthest, the fastest. Okay. Learning to invest outside of your market is, I think, hypercritical, especially for people in California.
Yeah.
Even I live in Colorado. My first honest to goodness rental property was 20 minutes down the street. I deployed 80,000 capital. I was so excited about this property. And then, about 30 days after closing, I'm like, wait a second, I have $400. If the toilet doesn't break, I'm managing the property. I'm like, how in the world am I going to become financially free? Do you know how much capital I have to deploy in order to make that happen?
Yep.
Right. And that's small potatoes probably to somebody who's trying to, do rental real estate in California.
Yep.
So I learned to invest in other markets where it actually made sense, where like Indianapolis at the time and Kansas City. I think that, you have to match the strategy to the investor. And for most investors, investing in their backyard just does not make sense.
And it's so funny though. Like, I think that with most people that I speak to about growing, any type of portfolio or their own portfolio, they often feel like they need to do it in their backyard, and they feel it's sorry. And again, Whitney, forgive me. I'm Australian and my language isn't great sometimes, but the bullshit rhetoric that Dave Ramsey has put into everyone's head is that don't be an out of state landlord and things along these lines. You've got to pay cash for everything, and all this stuff is that it's just this really, it's misconstrued. And I see people come to me so confused. And oftentimes also, and we spoke about this at the beginning of the show, is that, 99.9% of the realtors that, I see that, we buy properties from, I'd never take investment advice from. Realtors sometimes are not great from an investment perspective either. It takes the investor to identify that opportunity. So it's one of those things that from a materialistic perspective, people have to think that they need to feel, touch, and be able to see it or drive past it to have some gratification that they're doing it. But what are the things that if someone was going to enter another marketplace and that you've seen previously, like let's say that I'm in California, I want to buy that property in Atlanta, Georgia. I've never even been to Atlanta, Georgia. What should I look at?
If you're in California, you're going to invest in Atlanta, Georgia, if you were following a process that I would lay out for you, one, you would literally go to Atlanta, Georgia and drive around. You would
Okay.
spend time and dollars. Go spend a weekend there. See what it's like. Drive the neighborhoods. Take out a map. Figure out which ones you like, which ones you don't like. You're also going to meet with realtors. Meet with 3 or 4 realtors. Okay? Figure out who is that person that is going to be on your side, that is going to be your rock star, boots on the ground teammate. Okay. That would be the first couple of hurdles, to start getting your toes in the water and buying real estate. But also, you need a rock star property manager.
Okay.
And I think for your first deal in Georgia, you're going to go, scout the market, meet with a few realtors, figure out who's going to be on your team. And then whenever you close, you're going to meet with the property manager. Like, hopefully you've met with them virtually, but also like be at the house when the keys get handed over. Now, I know a lot of people just turned it off and they're like, Whitney, you just said the whole point of me investing on the market is so I can get my time back. But at least do this once, because you're building a business, right? You want to interview team members that you actually know, love, and trust, that are going to help you scale.
Right.
And that data that you're going to get by just driving around the market is priceless. And that's going to put your mind a little bit at ease, right? So when I had the reason why I started with the property here in Colorado for my first rental is because I had the same fear. But then I realized a couple of different, small, like, little things happened on the property. And then, I wasn't the one. I just called the plumber and he went down there.
Right.
I called a handyman and he went and repaired the fence. Um, I was really annoyed when my husband had to go paint a room before we got the property rented, because it was, an old nursery. So it was all pink, baby pink. And, not going to rent well to a family that has 2 boys. So
Sure.
they wanted the
Maybe.
room a different color, right? But I was so annoyed that he's gone, 3 nights out of the week to paint this room. And so I was like, wait a second, if I'm already annoyed with this now, with a property that is my own backyard, we have a small kid at home, like, I need to put the team in place, right? I need to think of this as me owning a business. And so I'm going to find the who and not be the how that it gets
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. Now, leading back to, I've got 2 questions for you, because I don't want to overextend the time that we have with you. The first question would be, I want to understand the mistakes. Like you said, mistakes before that you made in the very beginning of what not to do. And I'd love to understand maybe your top 3 mistakes that you made when first getting into this. And then the other one is that if I have $100,000 in cash right now, what would your strategy be in order to start building that portfolio out of state, wherever it may be? And take me as an example. Let's say I have $100,000 right now. I'm in California. I'm looking at buying some long-term income producing properties, the cash flow. What would be the strategy? So how do we go about this? Do we go with the mistakes first, or do we do the 100 grand question first?
Let's do the 100 grand question, because I think that's going to be a little bit more applicable, and maybe I can pull out some of the mistakes along the way.
Sure.
But $100,000, it's not about going shopping. It's about making sure that you actually are in a position to get lending first. And so
Okay.
that's rule number 1, create the income. And I know most people would be like, oh, well, I'm a realtor. I'm getting like these mad checks like every time I close. Yes, but have you structured your business in such a way that you can actually go to the bank and get a loan and use other people's money in order to amplify that $100,000? Or are you only going to be able to buy one property?
Right. Okay. It's a good
Right.
point.
So putting yourself in the position, do you have your debt to income all, figured out? Are you somebody that the bank wants to lend to? Okay. Number 2, we're going to go find a market. Okay. A lot of that can be done from a laptop and networking with investors, but eventually you're going to have to show your face in the market and get some real face time, driving around and also meeting and starting to build your team.
Right.
This can be done literally in 12 hours. You can get on a plane, fly out to a market, drive around the market, meet with a couple of realtors, maybe they're looking at, property with you so you get a nice sense of what's going on. And then you're going to have so much data from there. And now you're going to, understand which MSA you want to be in, which submarkets you want to be in, what is the type of property that you want to go after. Because some investors like me, I wanted to have B-class properties. I did not want to mess with the C-class properties and the Section 8 tenants. No, thank you. That was just not my cup of tea. Other investors love that.
Right.
That's why I'm saying each strategy is, we have to match the strategy to the investor.
Yep.
And then
we had a gentleman on the podcast recently that all they do is rent control in Section 8, and that's all they've ever really done, and they built an incredibly large portfolio of it. But obviously, they found their niche.
exactly, and there's less competition there.
Sure.
For me, I brought B-class properties that had foundation issues. That was my niche.
Oh wow.
I knew what to look for in that property, and I had a team.
Love to crack slab. Love to crack slab.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, somebody said I have a foundation issue. I'm scared. I've got a $20,000 bill. And I'm like, oh, I smell money.
Yeah. Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
How did you sniff that out? Just a quick question there.
Yeah. So part of that came from my team. I had a property manager who was doing some fix and flipping on the side. And
Okay.
I said, hey, I've got some money that I want to learn how to, BRRRR invest. So I want to fix and flip to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, okay, I'll show you. And then, this was in a time in his market where he had more opportunities than he had buyers to be able to
Right.
sell these opportunities to. And so I really got good at a specific range. Like if my foundation expenses got much past like 25K, I really wasn't interested but for like 10 to 25K, we were talking about some grading issues, a few I-beams, sealing some cracks in the walls. If I got past that 25K, there was a lot more that needed to be done, probably jacking up the house in a few places, and I really wasn't interested. It extended my timelines too far. But you eventually find what your niche is and the problems you're willing to solve.
Right. A question from a structural perspective is that obviously you mentioned get themselves into a good financial position. From a structural perspective, for those that are listening here, debt to income is obviously something that then can be really, if they have a primary residence that they're living in, and then this income property is not going to be, their first property. Their debt to income ratio, to the extent that they can actually get more loans in order to then purchase more and everything along those lines. How do they structure that in order to not have that become a problem?
Well, if we're talking about realtors, one that goes back to, how do you structure your LLC in which you're selling real estate under? We were talking at the beginning of the show. Are you just a normal LLC and you don't really have good business operations? You don't have a good, bookkeeping strategy, and you really can't show the income, or you organize like an S corp where you're actually paying yourself an income from that corporation, and then you're getting the rest of your income from distribution, right? That right there could help a realtor actually qualify, because now you have a W-2 income coming in. Now you could, run that for a couple of years, and now you qualify for, the 10 golden tickets.
Right.
So, it's just sitting down with your team, probably your accountant, and making sure that, things are structured appropriately. Maybe you're not even there yet. Maybe you've got, huge personal loans, car loans, student loans, all the like there. We want to get those paid down. And believe it or not, it's not doing the Dave Ramsey snowball or debt avalanche. While those are good tools, we can be a little bit more sophisticated. And I outline a tactic in my book, Money for Tomorrow, that would help people kind of line up those debts to get them paid off faster, to affect their DTI, but also to where they can actually get a relative return on their money.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Right.
But those are the two big ways that we're going to, put yourself in position to be ready to buy a house, or that next income property. Because your general rule of thumb, all of your current expenses need to be about like probably 25-ish%, which for a lot of people, that's hard. But to be able to qualify for the next loans, because we just have to get one. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are like, I need income to support 10. No, you just need income to support one. Why do you just need income to support one? Because you're going to go rent that property, and you're going to have a lease that's going to show the income to offset the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, and a little bit for reserves. And as long as all that continues to wash, you can continue to buy property.
And that's what I think is the missing link here. Is a lot of people go, well, how am I going to do this? So on and so forth. Is getting that long-term lease. It does wash for a lot of financial institutions. It washes that property's debt away, not away entirely, but that being said is that they take that into a very vast consideration to move on to the next one. Now, just while we run out the episode, I'd love to hear the top 3 mistakes that you made when getting into this.
No, I was totally perfect. What do you mean? Just kidding. Number one mistake. I mean, I don't want to call them. I don't really view them as mistakes, as like lessons learned.
Right.
My first lesson learned was I. For one, when I bought the property, my first property, my realtor put Rich Dad, Poor Dad in my hand and said, read this book. And I like read the first couple of chapters and I went, oh, real estate. Cool. That's what I'm doing. I'm buying the house. Well, I missed the whole point about having an income stream on the property. So I went into it with that W-2 mindset. Like, how can I have a property, my nice like little primary residence. And when that didn't work, how can I flip it as fast as possible? If
Right.
I'd been smart, I would have held on to that property because it was 2 blocks from a college and I would have rented it to college students.
Right.
So that was
lesson
like
learned.
lesson learned. Also on that property, I was 103% financed on that property. It worked out for me.
I was going to say there's part of me that I wasn't here. I've been in the US for 10 years, and there's part of it that it was such a silly time when you reflect and look at what they were doing. But I also looked at it in the sense of that, man, you could have bought some real estate around that.
Yeah. I borrowed $8,000 from my grandfather, which by the way, he probably cashed out a 15% CD to do
Right.
that.
Right.
He loved me. But I borrowed $8,000 from my grandfather and then bought the property. And then I took out a HELOC to pay him back and then had money to start the repairs on the property. Now, a lot of people would be like, that's beautiful, Whitney. And I'm like, but I was over leveraged and it just happened to work out for me on that particular property. I would
Yeah.
not do that anymore. I like investing from a position of strength and not really taking those risks. And then it's not about timing the market, it's time in the market. We can say that about stocks, bonds, and mutual fund. We can really say that about anything. But if somebody is sitting here wondering, is this the right time for me to start investing? It is. I mean, do you wish you started investing 30, 40 years ago? Absolutely, right? I do. But the best time to start is today. And, yes, things may not cash flow as well as you want to, but over time, as you're able to raise the rents, as that property appreciates, as you get the tax benefits, it's like a hockey stick curve, right? You're just, slow growth. And all of a sudden you're going to hit that inflection point.
Well, Whitney, thank you so much for joining us on Rethink Real Estate. I'll make sure that the link to your book, Money for Tomorrow, is in the comments section. Again, we'll make sure that everybody can follow you on all of your social media stuff as well, and where they can find you. We'll have it all in the show notes below. But it's been fascinating to understand your journey, and looking forward to keeping track of it as we keep moving forward as well. But thanks so much for sharing today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.